The same Rolex, worth $40,000, that had once symbolized her pain, now flashed in the light as Brandon's hand slammed into her chest. Once again, Serena felt the world tilt as she crashed into the luxury display. Autumn pumpkins shattered like her past hopes, their orange shells scattering across the cold marble, as silence once more claimed the magnificent mile. Serena lifted her head from the ground, blood seeping down her arm, and looked straight into the face twisted with contempt of the man standing over her. Brandon, her former fiancé, the one who had driven her to the brink of death 3 years ago. "Lie there, trash," he said, "thinking you were dead already." He didn't know who she was anymore. He didn't know that the girl from back then, the one who had dropped to her knees begging him not to leave, the one who had cried until there was nothing left inside her at a homeless shelter, the one who had lost the baby girl in her womb to hunger and exhaustion, the one who had stood on the Michigan Avenue Bridge at 2 o'clock in the morning and nearly let go, that girl was already dead. He didn't know she had been reborn from those ashes. He didn't know about the 5-carat diamond wedding ring hidden beneath her leather gloves, or the penthouse in the Gold Coast she had walked out of this morning, or the Black American Express card with no limit resting in her wallet. And Brandon most certainly didn't know about the man whose name was now legally bound to hers, the man who had pulled her back from the railing on that fateful night, the man whose security team was pinning Brandon to the floor right now, the man whose phone call was ringing in her pocket. Kieran O'Brien, her husband, the most dangerous dark prince in all of Chicago. When Serena's trembling fingers lifted the phone to her ear, Kieran's voice came through, cold as ice, asking if she was hurt, and she watched recognition begin to spread across Brandon's face. First confusion, then suspicion, then horror. He had just shoved the wrong woman. And in exactly 10 minutes, when Kieran's gleaming black Maybach convoy screamed into the parking structure of this mall, Brandon Hayes would learn a lesson about consequences, a lesson that would grind his entire world down into dust. But he didn't know that yet. Right now, in this moment, he still thought she was nothing. He still thought she was the trash he had thrown away 3 years ago. He still thought she was the helpless girl who had lost her child, lost her home, lost everything because of him. That was about to change. If you want to know what happens when Kieran arrives, like this video right now. Share it with anyone who needs a story about powerful rebirth. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next emotional stories. 6 hours before Brandon Hayes shoved her down onto the icy marble floor of the Magnificent Mile shopping center, Serena Mitchell woke inside a $20 million penthouse overlooking the Chicago skyline. Morning sunlight slipped through silk curtains and laid a pale gold sheen across her bare skin. Serena stayed still for a moment, taking in sheets that felt like clouds, and the warmth of the man sleeping beside her. Kieran O'Brien was still asleep, one arm draped around her waist as if he feared she might vanish in the night. Even in sleep, he was guarding her. She turned her head to look at her husband, 36 years old, black hair slightly tousled, the sharp angles of his face softened by rest. This was the Kieran the world never saw, not the dark prince who controlled Chicago, not the man who could make an entire city tremble with nothing but his name. This was Kieran who belonged only to her, the man who washed her hair every night, who sang her back to sleep after nightmares, who had pulled her away from the railing on the Michigan Avenue Bridge on that fateful night 3 years ago. Serena carefully eased his arm away, slipped out of bed, and walked into the dressing room. The space was as large as the apartment she used to rent before she met Brandon, with hundreds of expensive dresses and outfits hanging neatly by color. Chanel, Dior, Valentino, names that 3 years ago she would only have dared to admire through glass. But this morning Serena reached for a simple black knit dress. No logo, no crystals, no show. Some habits from hard times were ones she didn't want to abandon, and modesty was one of them. "You're doing it again," Kieran's voice came from behind her, low and still a little rough with sleep. Serena turned and saw him leaning in the doorway, dressed in black silk sleep pants, bare-chested. Even after seeing that sight hundreds of times, her heart still beat a little faster. "Doing what?" she asked, feigning innocence. "Choosing the cheapest thing in the closet," he said as he stepped closer and slid an arm around her waist. "You're the wife of one of the richest men in Chicago. You could buy the whole store if you wanted. I like simple things. You like pretending you don't deserve expensive things," Kieran said, tilting his head and looking straight into her eyes. "But you do deserve them, Serena. You deserve everything." She didn't answer. She only rested her head against his chest. Some wounds, Even 3 years of happiness beside Kieran still weren't fully healed. Brandon's words still echoed in her mind on certain late nights. You're nothing. You don't deserve anything. Kieran knew that. He always had. Where are you planning to go today? He asked, one hand smoothing through her hair. Shopping. It's Black Friday. I want to buy gifts for the students at school, and a few things for tomorrow's Thanksgiving dinner. Kieran was silent for a moment. Serena recognized that look, recognized him weighing something. Go with Finn and Connor. Oh, come on. I don't need bodyguards to go shopping. You do. His voice tightened, no longer gentle the way it had been a moment ago. This was the Kieran O'Brien the world knew, the man who didn't accept no. You know who I am. You know what I do. I've got enemies, Serena. People who wouldn't hesitate to hurt you just to get to me. This is Chicago, not a war zone. With me, anywhere you're alone is a war zone, he said, taking her chin, gentle but unyielding. This isn't a request. This is non-negotiable. Serena exhaled, defeated. She'd learned there were battles not worth fighting with Kieran, and her safety was one of them. Fine, I'll go with them. His shoulders eased, the tension draining away. Thank you. He kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then her lips, slow and deep. You've got a meeting, Serena said when they finally pulled apart, her breathing still unsteady. I know, he said, and still he didn't let her go. Kieran, give me 1 more minute. He dropped his head to her shoulder and breathed in the scent of her hair. I'll be back at 7. We've got plans at 8. Plans where? A surprise. His smile was dangerous and irresistible. Wear the red dress. The one I can't stop thinking about taking off you. Serena blushed even after 2 years of marriage. You're shameless. Only with you. They kissed once more before Kieran reluctantly released her and disappeared into the bathroom to get ready for his day. Serena watched him go, her chest filling with something she wouldn't have dared to dream of 3 years ago. Happiness. She didn't know that would be the last kiss before her world was turned upside down. She didn't know that 6 hours later she'd be lying on a shopping mall floor with blood running down her arm, staring up at the face of the man who had once destroyed her life. And she certainly didn't know that Kieran O'Brien, her husband, Chicago's Dark Prince, would burn that man's entire world to the ground for daring to lay a hand on her. The magnificent Mile shopping center was packed shoulder to shoulder on Black Friday. Serena moved with the crowd of shoppers, a few small gift bags in her hands for her students, while Finn and Connor followed quietly behind her, keeping just the right distance. A holiday feeling filled the air, with autumn wreaths, decorative pumpkins, and warm golden lights everywhere you looked. People laughed and talked, jostling as they hunted for bargains, and Serena only wanted to finish quickly and get home to prepare dinner with Kieran. Then she passed a children's boutique. Her steps stopped as if someone had poured cement over the soles of her shoes. In the display window, a tiny white dress with lilies embroidered along the collar sat on a little mannequin. It looked exactly like the dress she had bought for Lily with her very last coins 3 years ago, the dress her baby girl had never gotten to wear. Serena's heart cinched tight. She stood there staring through the glass, and memory crashed over her like a tidal wave. Her trembling hand went to her stomach, the place that had been Lily's home for 5 short months. Her daughter, the child she had loved from the instant she learned she existed, the child she had lost to hunger and exhaustion, alone in a charity hospital, with no one holding her hand. Ms. Mitchell, are you all right? Finn asked as he stepped closer, his voice full of concern. Serena blinked, fighting to force the tears back. I'm fine, she said. It's just memories. She turned away and tried to walk faster, to put distance between herself and that store. She shouldn't look. She shouldn't remember. Not today. Not when she was happy. Not when she had Kieran. Not when life had finally started to smile at her. But fate had its own cruel ways of dragging the past back into the light. Serena lifted her head, and her heart stopped. Brandon Hayes was standing less than 10 meters away, leaning against the Cartier jewelry counter, laughing and talking with a young woman wearing a Hermes bag and a tight dress that showed off every curve. He looked the same, still polished and flashy, still wearing that charming smile, still carrying the confidence of a man who had never once paid for what he'd done. 3 years. 3 years since he left her with a note and a mountain of debt. 3 years since he stole everything and turned her into a homeless woman. 3 years since her daughter died because of what he had done. Serena's shopping bags nearly slipped from her hands. She wanted to turn away, to run, to disappear before he noticed her. But her feet refused to move. rooted to the marble floor like a tree sunk deep into stone. Brandon looked up. His eyes skimmed the crowd and landed on her. One empty second. Then recognition. Then contempt. He said something to the woman at his side, and the two of them started walking toward Serena. Her heart hammered wildly. Finn and Connor moved closer, the instincts of professional protectors snapping into place. Serena. Brandon stopped in front of her, his tone coated in fake surprise. I can't believe it. I thought you'd be digging through trash somewhere. Who let you into a place like this? Serena swallowed, fighting to keep her voice steady. Brandon. Oh, it still remembers my name, he said, turning to the woman beside him. Rebecca. This is the clingy one I told you about, the girl who almost ruined my life. Rebecca Hughes looked Serena up and down with undisguised scorn. This is her. She looks so pathetic. I thought she'd be worse off than this. I don't have anything to say to you, Serena said, trying to step around him. But Brandon blocked her path. Where are you rushing off to? After all these years, you're not going to stay and catch up. He laughed, the same laugh that once made her fall in love with him, the laugh that now made her sick to her stomach. Look at you. You're dressed decently. Found some idiot willing to feed you? Huh, that's your only talent, isn't it? Leeching onto men like a parasite. You took all my money. Serena's voice shook, but she didn't back away. You left me when I was pregnant. Pregnant? Brandon burst out laughing. And you still have the nerve to bring that up. You probably staged it to keep me. You women are all the same, dirty tricks. She was your baby, Serena said, tears spilling out even though she didn't want them to. Lily. I named her Lily. Lily. Brandon frowned as if he'd just heard something disgusting. You named that thing. That thing was your child. Not my child. Never was my child. He stepped closer, his voice lowering into something venomous. Besides, it's a good thing it died. I don't want my DNA mixed with trash like you. Serena's world collapsed. She heard Finn shout something. She heard fast footsteps, but everything felt submerged, far away and warped, as if she were underwater. Brandon's words kept ringing in her skull, over and over, like a funeral bell. It's a good thing it died. Her daughter, her Lily. He was saying her death was a blessing. Finn moved in between them, placing himself as a barrier. Sir, please step back. Who are you? Brandon shoved Finn. This is private. Everything happened too fast. In a blind, drunken-like rage, Brandon lunged. He caught the guards off balance as they tried to manage the closing crowd, slipping past their defense for a split second to reach Serena. And then, in a burst of rage, he drove his hands straight into Serena's chest. The shove from a hand, wearing a Rolex worth $40,000, slammed into her before she could even react. Serena fell forward into a display shelf of luxury goods, autumn pumpkins shattering around her as her body hit the icy marble floor. Her dress tore. Blood sprang from her elbow where it struck a sharp metal edge. Her shopping bags flew everywhere. The entire Magnificent Mile shopping center sank into a deathly silence. And inside Serena's pocket, her phone began to ring. Finn slammed Brandon to the floor in 2 seconds flat. One knee pressed hard into his back. Brandon's arm wrenched behind him. Connor was already at Serena's side, helping her sit up, his face going pale when he saw the blood running down her arm. Rebecca shrieked that she was going to call the police, that she was going to sue, that she was going to have every one of them thrown in jail for daring to lay hands on her fiancé. The shoppers around them stood frozen, phones lifted to record, whispering and murmuring to one another. Mall security rushed in, pushed the crowd back, and escorted Serena into the security office, while Brandon and Rebecca were held in a separate room. Serena sat in a chair as a medic cleaned the wound on her elbow. She didn't feel the pain. She didn't feel anything at all. Brandon's words kept echoing in her head like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. It's a good thing it died. Her daughter, her Lily. He had said her death was something to celebrate. Her phone rang for the 3rd time inside her pocket. Serena stared at the screen with empty eyes. Kieran's name flashed. Her hand shook as she answered. Are you all right? Kieran's voice came through, strangely calm. Serena opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her throat was locked tight. Serena, he said, still calm, but there was something boiling beneath that ice. Connor called me. Are you hurt? She swallowed hard. I'm fine. Don't lie to me. His voice dropped, cold as steel. Are you hurt? My elbow is bleeding. I fell. But I'm fine. I really am. Silence stretched out. Serena could hear Kieran breathing through the phone, slow and controlled. the way he breathed when he was forcing rage back down. "Who touched you?" 3 words. Only 3. But the way he said them made the entire room feel as if the temperature had dropped. "Brandon," Serena whispered. "My former fiancé. He pushed me." Silence again. This time longer. More frightening. "Is he still there?" "Security has him in the next room. They're calling the police." "Don't let him leave." Kieran's voice was no longer a request. It was an order. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. "Kieran, you don't need to." 10 minutes. The line went dead. Serena stared at the dark phone screen, a tangled rush of relief and fear rising in her chest. She knew Kieran. She knew what he did when someone laid a hand on her, and she didn't know whether she should stop him or let it happen. 1 minute later, the head of security's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face shifted from stern to bloodless in seconds. "Yes, sir. I understand." Immediately, he hung up and turned to his staff, his voice trembling. "Cancel the call to the police. False alarm." The employee blinked, stunned. "But sir, someone was assaulted." "I said cancel it." The head of security swallowed. "And prepare to receive a VIP guest. Now." Serena watched it all with tired eyes. 1 phone call. Kieran had canceled the police with a single phone call. She'd always known her husband was powerful, but seeing it happen right in front of her still left her reeling. This was Kieran O'Brien's world, a world where the law bowed to power, where everything could change with nothing but a name. 8 minutes passed in taut silence. Serena could still hear Rebecca screaming in the next room, demanding a lawyer, demanding justice, demanding punishment for anyone who dared touch Brandon. That girl didn't know. She didn't know the storm was coming. She didn't know justice was about to be delivered, just not in the way she imagined. In the 9th minute, Finn stepped in, his expression grave. "The boss is here." And then Serena heard it. Engines roaring outside in the parking structure. Not one car, several. Tires shrieking on the pavement. Doors slamming one after another. In the 10th minute, the security office door opened. Kieran O'Brien walked in. He was still wearing the charcoal gray 3-piece suit from his morning meeting, but there was nothing civilized left in the way he carried himself now. 6 men followed behind him, all dressed in black, each of them with something bulging beneath a jacket. The head of mall security shot to his feet like a spring, bowed, and didn't dare look Kieran in the eye. The medic stepped back on instinct. The entire room seemed to shrink from the presence of the man who had just walked in. But Kieran didn't look at any of them. His eyes only searched for Serena. In an instant, the frightening coldness on his face melted away. He crossed the room in long strides, dropped to his knees in front of her, and lifted her face in both hands with a gentleness that clashed sharply with the tight air around them. "Serena," he said. 1 word, and it carried his whole world inside it. Serena looked into her husband's eyes. Those gray eyes that were usually cold as steel, now flooded with worry. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Kieran's gaze dropped to her arm, where the wound had been quickly bandaged, yet blood still seeped through the gauze. His jaw locked. Then he looked at the dress torn at her shoulder, and saw the bruise blooming along her collarbone. His hand trembled slightly as he touched that bruise, careful as if she might shatter. "I'm here," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You're safe now," Serena nodded, tears spilling despite her efforts. She had tried to be strong. She had tried to stay calm. But Kieran's arrival cracked the wall she'd built, and everything inside her surged out beyond her control. Kieran wiped her tears with his thumb, his eyes soft in a way he saved only for her. Then he asked, his voice gentle, though Serena could hear something dangerous boiling underneath. "What did he say to you?" Serena went still. That question. She had known he would ask, but she couldn't repeat Brandon's words. She couldn't bring herself to tell Kieran what he'd said about Lily, about their daughter, about the child Kieran had claimed as his own even though he had never once been able to meet her. She tried, but her throat closed. "Serena," Kieran lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "What did he say?" She shook her head. Her lips trembled. Her whole body trembled. The tears came harder. Kieran studied her for a long moment. He didn't need her to speak. He understood. It was something worse than the fall. Something that had gone straight for the deepest wound in his wife's heart. And there was only one thing that could break Serena like this. Lily. Brandon had said something about Lily. Kieran's eyes changed. The tenderness vanished as if it had never existed. What replaced it was pure darkness, The darkness that had built his empire. The darkness that made all of Chicago afraid. He rose slowly, moving like a predator holding back its instinct to kill. "Stay here with Finn," he told Serena, his calm so cold it was terrifying. "I'll be back." Then Kieran O'Brien turned and walked toward the door leading to the room where Brandon Hayes was being held. The 6 men followed in silence. The security room door opened with a dry, jarring sound. Brandon Hayes was sitting in a chair, with Rebecca beside him, still complaining nonstop about being treated unfairly. When she saw Kieran step in, Brandon shot to his feet, his face flushed red with rage. "Finally, someone with authority shows up," he roared. "I want a lawyer right now. That crazy woman's security attacked me. I'm going to sue this whole mall into the ground." Kieran said nothing. He stood there in silence, looking at Brandon with the eyes of a man measuring every bone in his body. "Did you hear what I said?" Brandon took a step forward, a finger stabbing straight toward Kieran's face. "Who are you? The manager? The director? I demand." He didn't get to finish. Kieran moved like lightning. One hand seized Brandon by the throat, lifted him off the ground, and slammed him into the wall behind him. The sound of Brandon's head hitting the wall snapped through the room. Rebecca screamed in horror. 2 of Kieran's guards moved instantly, blocking her, pressing a cloth over her mouth. Brandon thrashed, his face turning purple from lack of air, his hands clawing at Kieran's arm, useless. Kieran held him against the wall as if he were holding an insect, without the slightest strain. "My name is Kieran O'Brien," he said, calm and cold, as if he were announcing the weather. "The woman you just shoved to the ground is my wife." Brandon's eyes went wide, the aggression drained out of his face, replaced by pure terror. O'Brien. In Chicago, who didn't know that name? Who didn't know the dark prince who controlled every corner of the city, from the skyscrapers to the darkest alleys? I didn't know." Brandon managed to rasp. Kieran released him. Brandon collapsed to the floor, coughing violently, one hand at his throat. He hadn't even caught his breath when Kieran's kick drove into his ribs. A sharp crack rang out. Brandon howled in pain, curling on the cold tile. "That's for touching her," Kieran said, still even, as if nothing had happened. He turned to one of his men and signaled with his eyes. The man immediately pulled out a tablet, his fingers moving quickly over the screen. "Brandon Hayes, 32 years old," the man read aloud. "Son of Richard Hayes, chairman of Hayes Investment. Salary of $300,000 a year. Trust fund of $1.5 million. Engaged to Rebecca Hughes, daughter of the chief executive officer of Hughes Technologies." "Continue," Kieran ordered. "Financial records show a pattern of scamming women," the man said. "We found 5 victims over the past 10 years, all with the same model. Approach, take their assets, abandon them." He paused, his voice dropping. "One of them, Jennifer Martinez, died by suicide 6 months after being abandoned by the subject. She was 23. Kieran looked down at Brandon, curled on the floor, and his eyes turned colder than ever. "You don't just destroy lives," he said. "You kill people." "I didn't kill anyone," Brandon groaned, tears and mucus running down his face. "She did that to herself." "You pushed her to the edge," Kieran said, lowering into a squat until he was level with Brandon's face. "Just like you pushed Serena to the edge. Just like you made her lose her baby, lose her home, lose everything, until she stood on the railing of the Michigan Avenue Bridge and wanted to jump." Brandon trembled, unable to look Kieran in the eyes. "Do you know where I found her?" Kieran continued, his voice gentle, but carrying a deep, furious heat. "On the bridge, at 2 a.m. She was going to jump into the river because of what you did. Because her daughter died. Because she had no reason left to live." Kieran stood, looking down at Brandon with the gaze of a judge. "This is what's going to happen to you," he said, counting each point. 1. Your father will receive every piece of evidence of your scams. 2. Your fiancé will receive a detailed file on your relationship with Serena, including the baby's medical records. 3. The media will receive the complete story of all 5 victims, including Jennifer Martinez. 4. Your trust fund will be frozen for a fraud investigation. 5. Jennifer Martinez's suicide will be reopened for investigation. You may face criminal charges. "No." Brandon crawled forward and clutched at Kieran's leg. "Please, I'll do anything. I'll give money. Any amount." Kieran kicked him away, disgust plain on his face. "You think money can buy me?" he said with a thin, contemptuous laugh. "I have more money than you can imagine. What I want isn't money. What I want is for you to pay for what you did to my wife." Kieran turned his back and paused at the door. "Every time you lose something," he said without looking back. "Every time you feel desperate, trapped, with no way out, I want you to remember Serena. Remember the girl you abandoned while she was carrying your child. Remember the baby who died because of you. Remember the woman you kicked down today in that mall." He opened the door. "Your hell starts now, Brandon Hayes," he said, still not turning around. "And I'll make sure it lasts for the rest of your life." The door shut. Brandon's sobbing pleas echoed behind it, but Kieran didn't look back even once. Kieran returned to Serena's room right after leaving Brandon. He didn't say a word. He only bent down and lifted her into his arms the way you'd carry a child. Serena didn't protest, didn't ask what had happened in the other room. She only let her head fall against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart, clinging to that rhythm like an anchor in the middle of a storm. They walked down the mall corridor under the curious stare of hundreds of people. Phones were raised to record. Whispers rippled through the crowd, but Kieran didn't care. He moved as if only the two of them existed in the world. Eyes fixed straight ahead, arms holding Serena tight against him. A gleaming black Maybach was already waiting at the entrance. Kieran eased Serena into the back seat, buckled her in the way you'd buckle in a little girl, then sat down beside her. The convoy rolled out immediately, slicing through the air toward the Gold Coast. The entire way, Kieran held her hand, his thumb tracing small circles over the back of it. He didn't ask questions. He didn't speak. He only stayed with her, making sure she knew she wasn't alone. Serena stared out the window, watching Chicago slide past in the dusk, and she felt bone-deep exhaustion. Not from the cut on her elbow, but from the wound in her heart that had just been torn open all over again. When they reached the penthouse, Kieran carried her inside. The household staff stood lined along the hall, worry on their faces, but Kieran only gave a short, wordless nod. They all withdrew at once, disappearing into the rooms behind them. The vast penthouse fell into silence, with only Kieran's footsteps echoing across the oak floor. He took her into the master bedroom and set her down on the edge of the bed. Then he knelt in front of her, lifted her face in both hands, and looked into eyes swollen red from crying. "Let me take care of you." Serena nodded. She had no strength left for words. Kieran rose and gently unzipped the black dress that had torn at the shoulder. She felt his hand tremble slightly when he touched the bruise on her collarbone. He slipped the dress off her body, then her undergarments, his movements slow and careful. Nothing suggestive in them, only the pure tenderness of a man caring for the woman he loved. He carried her into the bathroom, where a white marble tub had already been filled with warm water before the staff left. Kieran set her down in the bath, then took off his vest, his shirt, his trousers, and stepped in behind her. Warm water wrapped around Serena's body, soothing bruises and tight muscles. Kieran poured shampoo into his palm, worked it between his hands, and began to massage her scalp. His fingers moved slowly, gently, drawing small circles the way he always did every night. Serena closed her eyes and let his care sink into her, cell by cell. Then the tears began to fall. She couldn't hold them back anymore. Everything she'd forced down from the moment she saw Brandon, from the moment she heard those venomous words, from the moment she hit the cold marble floor, all of it burst out as if a dam had broken. She cried, her shoulders shaking in waves, her choked sobs echoing through the large bathroom. Kieran turned her toward him and pulled her into his arms. Serena pressed her face into his chest and cried as if every ounce of pain from the past 3 years was pouring out at once. He held her tightly, one hand smoothing her hair, the other wrapped around her back, keeping her as if he feared she would disappear if he let go. They stayed that way a long time, as the warm water slowly cooled, under soft golden light, in a silence broken only by Serena's crying. When the sobbing finally began to ease, Kieran kissed the top of her head and whispered in the gentlest voice he had, "Tell me, everything, from the beginning." Serena drew in a deep breath, her eyes fixed on empty space as if she were staring into a distant past. Kieran still held her in the bathtub, the water cold now, but neither of them wanted to move. He waited, patient the way he always waited for her, giving her the time she needed to find the right words. "I don't know where to begin," she said, her voice raw after the long crying. "From the beginning," Kieran murmured into her hair. "I want to know everything about you, the parts you've never told." Serena closed her eyes. The memories she had tried to bury for so many years began to rise, sharp and painful, as vivid as the first day. "My mother left when I was 8, she began, her voice hollow. "No goodbye. No note. One morning I woke up and she was just gone. Her closet was empty. My father's wallet was empty too. She took everything and disappeared like she'd never existed." Kieran's arms tightened around her, but he didn't speak. "My father," Serena continued, "he never recovered after that. He started drinking, then drinking more. Then there wasn't a single day he wasn't drunk." Serena swallowed. "And when he was drunk, he hit me. He hit me because I looked like my mother. He hit me because I reminded him of the woman who abandoned him. He hit me because he needed someone to pour his rage into." She felt Kieran's body go rigid behind her, his jaw locking near her ear. "He died when I was 19. Cirrhosis. I was the one who found him on the kitchen floor, a broken bottle beside him." Serena gave a bitter little laugh. "I didn't cry. I just stood there looking at his body, and not one tear fell. Does that make me a bad person?" "No," Kieran said at once. "You're not bad. You were a child who endured far too much." Serena shook her head slightly and went on as if she hadn't heard him. "Before he died, I ended up in foster care, from 14 to 18, 4 years, 6 different homes." She paused, her breathing heavier. "The 4th home," she said, her voice shrinking to almost a whisper. "The husband in that house, Serena couldn't finish, but she didn't have to. Kieran understood. He always did. "The scar on your back," he said, not as a question. Serena nodded. She turned a little, letting Kieran see the long scar running from her shoulder blade down toward her waist. A scar he had seen hundreds of times and never asked about, because he knew she would speak when she was ready. "I fought back," she said. "He used a belt. The metal buckle cut into my skin. I screamed loud enough that the neighbors heard and called the police." Kieran stared at the scar, his jaw clenched so hard she could hear his teeth grinding. His hand trembled when he touched the roughened skin, gentle as if he were touching a butterfly's wing. Was he punished? His voice was ice. 6 years in prison, out after 4 for good behavior. Serena gave a bitter smile. "The justice system is wonderful, isn't it?" Kieran didn't answer, but Serena knew he was storing it away. He would find that man's name, and he would make sure the man received the kind of justice the system had failed to deliver. But that was for later. After I aged out of foster care, I did whatever work I could find. Waiting tables, washing dishes, cleaning. I supported myself, paid for college myself, built a life from nothing. Serena drew a shaky breath. "I thought I was strong. I thought I didn't need anyone. I thought I could face the whole world alone." She turned to look at Kieran, her eyes still red, but the tears had run out. "Then I met Brandon, and for the first time in my life, someone said he loved me. Someone held me. Someone made me feel like I was worth loving." Her voice broke. "No one ever loved me, Kieran. Not once. My mother left me. My father hit me. Foster care abused me. I grew up believing I didn't deserve love." Tears slid down again. "Until I met Brandon. And I clung to him like a drowning woman clings to a lifeline. I was so stupid I didn't see it wasn't love. It was a trap." Serena drew in a deep breath, trying to steady her voice so she could keep going. Kieran still held her from behind, silent and listening, his hand stroking her arm in a wordless encouragement. "At first, he was perfect," she began, her voice bitter to the core. "He said everything I wanted to hear. That I was beautiful, that I was smart, that I deserved to be loved. He bought me flowers every week, took me to beautiful restaurants, introduced me to his friends like I was his most precious treasure." She gave a short laugh, with no joy in it. "I didn't know it was a tactic. I didn't know it was how a predator lures prey into a trap. I only knew that for the first time in my life, someone loved me, and I was willing to do anything to keep that love." Serena paused and swallowed. "Everything changed slowly, so slowly I didn't even notice. He started criticizing me. Small things at first. My hairstyle wasn't flattering. My clothes were too cheap. My friends weren't good enough for him. Then he isolated me. He forbade me from seeing my friends, forbade me from speaking to male coworkers, forbade me from going anywhere without him." Her voice began to shake. "He said it was because he loved me, because he wanted to protect me, and I believed him. I believed every word because I didn't know what real love was supposed to look like. Kieran tightened his hold, his jaw clenched, but he still didn't speak. Then it became about money. Serena went on. He said we should combine our finances. Said that's what serious couples do. I gave him access to my bank account. Every paycheck I earned, he controlled. I had to ask permission to buy a dress. I had to explain every dollar I spent, and he spent my money like water, on expensive suits, parties with his friends, trips I was never even allowed to go on. She drew a trembling breath. 3 years, Kieran. 3 years I lived like that, working 2 jobs to support both of us while he was finding himself and building his career. I was exhausted. I was lonely. I started believing what he said about me, that I wasn't good enough, that nobody else would want me, that I should be grateful he stayed. Tears slid down her cheeks again, but she didn't stop. Then I got pregnant. Her voice softened, carrying a deep, aching grief. I was happy, Kieran, truly happy, for the first time in 3 years. I thought a baby would change everything, that it would make him love me more, that it would turn us into a real family. She let out a bitter laugh. I was so stupid. Serena closed her eyes and the most painful memory crashed over her. When I was 4 months pregnant, he vanished. I came home from work, and the apartment was empty. His clothes were gone. Anything valuable was gone. And my bank account. She choked. $47,000. Every penny I'd saved over 5 years. He took it all. Behind her, Kieran sucked in a sharp breath. But that wasn't all, Serena went on, her voice shaking violently now. He opened credit cards in my name. $23,000 in debt. He told my boss I was mentally unstable. I got fired. My reputation was destroyed. Nobody wanted to hire a pregnant woman with a record like that. She opened her eyes and stared at the blank space in front of her. He left a note, just a small piece of paper on the kitchen table. Her voice broke. You've always been a burden. The baby is just an excuse to cling to me forever. Don't look for me. You don't deserve me. Serena turned to look at Kieran, her eyes red and full of suffering. I read that note hundreds of times. And I believed it. I believed I didn't deserve anything. I believed I was a burden. I believed it was all my fault. Serena went quiet for a long time, gathering what little strength she had left to go on. The next part of her story was the most painful part. The part she'd never told anyone, not even Kieran. He knew she'd lost her baby. He knew she'd once wanted to die. But he didn't know the details. He didn't know how far down she'd fallen before he found her on that bridge. After Brandon disappeared, I lost my apartment within 2 weeks, she began, her voice hollow, like she was telling someone else's life. No money for rent, no job, no one to turn to. The landlord put me out on the street with a suitcase of clothes and a 4-month pregnant belly. Kieran's arms tightened around her, his breath hot at her ear, but he still didn't say a word. I lived in my car for a while, an old Honda I'd bought with money from part-time work back in college. I parked in supermarket lots, church lots, anywhere I could sleep through the night without being chased off. She swallowed. Then the car was taken too, because I didn't have enough money to keep it registered. One morning I woke up and saw a tow truck hooking it up. I stood on the sidewalk with my suitcase and watched the last thing I owned disappear. Serena drew a shaking breath. I went into a homeless shelter, one shared room with 20 other women. Bunk beds, thin blankets, not enough food to feel full. She stopped, her voice catching. One night, a man slipped into my room. He tried to... She couldn't finish. She didn't need to. Kieran's body went rigid behind her. Every muscle pulled tight. I fought him off, Serena said quickly. I screamed, and people got there in time. But after that night, I couldn't sleep in the shelter anymore. I wandered the streets, slept in parks, under bridges, anywhere that felt safer. She let out a bitter sound. Nowhere is safe for a homeless pregnant woman. Serena looked down at her hands, fingers laced together, trembling. I ate from trash cans, leftovers behind restaurants, old bread from bakeries, anything I could find to make it through the day. Her voice cracked. I knew I needed to eat. I knew the baby needed nutrition, but I had nothing. No one, just me and a belly that kept growing, and despair that kept getting deeper. Tears slid down her cheeks, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. I named her Lily. White Lily, a symbol of purity and hope. Her voice softened, threaded with an endless love for the child she never got to meet. I talked to her every day. I told her about the life I was going to build for the two of us. I promised her that no matter what happened, I'd love her. I'd protect her. I'd never abandon her the way my mother abandoned me. She choked on the words. I found a tiny white dress in a thrift store, with lilies embroidered along the collar. I used my last coins to buy it. It was the only thing I could give her. A dress, a name, and my love. Serena closed her eyes, and the worst memory of all hit her like a tidal wave. That night, I woke up in a pool of blood, she whispered. I was sleeping under a bridge, the cold cut straight through skin and bone, and when I opened my eyes, I saw blood. Blood everywhere. Pain ripping my stomach apart. Kieran held her tighter, his body shaking even as he tried to contain it. I walked to the hospital, 2 miles, in the winter night, blood running down my legs. It hurt so much I thought I'd die on the way. Her tears came hard, like rain. When I finally got to the emergency room, the doctor looked at me with pity and said words I'll never forget. She opened her eyes and stared into nothing. Her gaze emptied out. The fetus didn't make it. Severe malnutrition. Your body wasn't strong enough to sustain the baby. Silence stretched on, broken only by water dripping from the shower and the heavy breathing of both of them. I lay in that hospital bed all night, holding an empty belly, crying for the child I'd lost, for the white dress she would never wear, for the life I promised her and couldn't give. Her voice splintered. No one held my hand. No one stayed with me. I lost my baby alone, Kieran. Completely alone. Serena fell silent for a moment, her breathing heavy after telling him about the night she lost Lily. Kieran still held her from behind, wordless, but she could feel every muscle in his body drawn tight, could feel the rage and the grief he was holding back for her sake. After I got out of the hospital, I went back to the shelter. She went on, her voice empty, like someone who'd run out of feelings altogether. I had nothing left. No money, no home, no baby, no reason to live. I just existed from one day to the next, like a walking corpse. She drew a shaky breath. Then I met Margaret. For the first time since she began, Serena's voice softened, carrying a small warmth in the middle of so much suffering. She was homeless, had been on the streets of Chicago for more than 10 years. Hair white as snow, back bent, most of her teeth gone. But her eyes? Serena managed a faint smile even with tears still on her face. Her eyes were the warmest I'd ever seen. She closed her eyes and the memory of the old woman surged back. On my first night back at the shelter after losing Lily, I lay curled on the bunk bed, crying without making a sound. Margaret came over and sat beside me. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't offer empty comfort. She just sat there, stroked my hair, and sang an old lullaby in a rough, worn voice. Serena opened her eyes and stared into the distance. From that night on, Margaret took care of me like I was her daughter. She gave me her own small share of food. She tried to keep me warm with the only thin blanket she had. She told me about her life, about the husband she'd lost, about the daughter she hadn't seen in 20 years. She said I reminded her of her little girl. Serena's voice caught. Margaret was the first person who ever made me feel loved without demanding anything back. Not like Brandon using me. Not like my father blaming me. She just loved me. That was it. Serena paused and swallowed. 3 weeks after I lost Lily, Margaret started coughing. At first it was just a little cough, and she said she was fine. Then it got worse. Then she couldn't even stand up. I begged the shelter staff to call an ambulance, but they said there was no money, no insurance, nothing they could do. Tears ran down Serena's cheeks. I held her all through that last night. She held my hand, so weak, and she said the last words I'll never forget. Serena's voice broke. Don't give up, baby girl. This world needs you. Live. For me. For Lily. For yourself. She sobbed, shaking, and then she closed her eyes. And I was alone again. Kieran held her tighter, his lips against her hair, murmuring meaningless sounds only to make sure she knew he was there. Margaret died of pneumonia, Serena said, her breath trembling. On the shelter floor. No doctor. No medicine. Nothing but me holding her in her last moments. She swallowed hard. They took her body away the next morning. I don't know where they buried her. I don't know if anyone ever came to visit her. She lived and died as if she'd never existed. She went quiet for a long time, gathering strength for the hardest part. 2 weeks after Margaret died, I couldn't take it anymore. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I lost my baby. I lost Margaret. I lost everything. I had no reason to wake up in the morning. No reason to breathe. Serena closed her eyes. 2 in the morning. I walked to the Michigan Avenue Bridge. The cold cut straight through skin and bone, but I didn't feel anything. I climbed over the railing, stood on the outside edge, and looked down at the black water below. She felt Kieran go utterly still behind her, his breathing stopping. I thought about Lily, about the white dress she would never wear, about the life I promised her and couldn't give. I thought maybe this was the only way to be with her again. Tears slid down her face. I stood there with my hands gripping that freezing railing, the wind off Lake Michigan hitting my face like it wanted to shove me down. And I whispered, her voice shattered, "Wait for me, Lily. Mommy's coming." Serena opened her eyes and turned her head to look at Kieran. His eyes were red, his jaw clenched. But there was something else there, too. Pain, understanding, and a love so deep it almost stole her breath. And then I heard a voice. She whispered, "Your voice." Serena closed her eyes and let the memory of that fateful night rush back in. She still remembered every detail, every second, as if it had happened yesterday. The wind cut into her skin, the sound of the Chicago River moving beneath her, her hands clamped around the freezing railing, trembling not from the cold but from the strange mix of terror and relief. She was ready to let go, ready to let the black water swallow her and carry her to Lily. And then she heard that voice. Don't. One word, but it was enough to stop her. Serena turned her head and saw a man standing a few yards away. Tall, dark-haired, wearing an expensive suit, yet looking worn down and exhausted. He didn't rush at her, didn't shout for the police, didn't do what people usually did when they saw someone about to jump. He only stood there, watching her with gray eyes that were cold, but with something else buried deep beneath that surface. "Go away," Serena said, her voice rough from crying too much. "This has nothing to do with you." "I'm not going anywhere," the man answered, his calm almost unnatural. "Who are you?" she snapped. "A cop, a therapist, or just some curious passerby who wants to watch someone die?" He didn't answer right away. He took one slow step closer, careful, the way you approach a wounded animal. "I'm someone who stood where you're standing," he said. Serena went still. For the first time since she climbed over the railing, she truly looked at the man in front of her. Not a casual glance, but a searching one, as if she were hunting for truth inside his words. "Not this bridge," he went on, taking another step. "A different bridge, 10 years ago, after my father was killed in front of me." Silence. Nothing but wind and the river below. "I didn't jump," he said, his voice dropping. "Not because I was brave, because I was angry. Angry enough that I wanted to live just to make the people who hurt me pay." Serena shook her head, tears sliding down her freezing cheeks. "I don't have anything left to be angry about. I don't have anything left at all." The man's gaze flicked to her coat pocket, where something made a small bulge. "What do you have in your pocket?" Serena's hand tightened on the tiny white dress she had carried with her for weeks. Lily's dress, the only thing she had left. "That matters to you," the man said, not as a question. "You don't want it falling into the water with you. Why?" "It's my daughter's," Serena's voice cracked. "Where is your daughter?" he asked. "Dead," she whispered. 5 weeks ago, inside me." Silence stretched out again. The wind kept blowing, carrying damp air off the river. The man took another step. He was close enough now for Serena to see the deep fatigue in those gray eyes, close enough for her to recognize that he was carrying wounds of his own. "Do you think your daughter wants her mother to jump down there?" he asked, his voice gentle, yet strong enough to pierce the numb shell around her heart. Serena didn't answer. She couldn't. "If you jump tonight," he continued, "who will remember her? Who will keep that dress? Who will tell the world she existed? Who will bring flowers to her grave every year?" Serena's tears poured like rain. His words stabbed through the numbness and reached the deepest part of her, the part that still wanted to live, the part that still loved Lily. "I don't know you. I don't know what happened to you. But I know one thing." The man held out his hand, large and steady, in the cold air. "Tonight isn't the night you die. Tonight is the night you give me the chance to prove tomorrow can be different." Serena stared at his hand, the hand of a complete stranger. in the middle of a Chicago winter, on the bridge where she meant to end everything. "One night," he said, his voice firm, with just a trace of pleading. "Give me one night. If tomorrow morning you still want to die, I won't stop you. But give me tonight." The next seconds were the longest seconds of Serena's life. She looked at the stranger's hand, looked down at the black water below, looked back at his hand. Lily, Margaret, the white dress in her pocket. The promise she had failed to keep, and the promise she could still keep if she stayed alive. Then she took his hand. Kieran pulled her back over the railing in one swift motion that was still gentle. Serena's knees buckled the moment her feet hit the sidewalk, her body too weak to hold itself up. He lowered her down, and the two of them sat on the freezing pavement, and Serena cried. She cried as if every ounce of pain from 27 years of living was spilling out all at once. Kieran didn't say anything. He only held her. A man who was a complete stranger, holding a woman who was a complete stranger, on a bitter cold bridge at 2 a.m. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered into her hair. "At least not tonight." And Serena, for the first time after weeks of hell, believed the promise of a stranger. Serena stopped speaking, her eyes on Kieran with a love so deep it seemed to fill the space between them. They were still sitting in the bathtub, the water long since gone cold, but neither of them wanted to move. She'd finished her part. Now it was Kieran's turn, the part she knew but had never heard him say out loud on a night like this. "You said you'd stood on a bridge too," she whispered. "Tell me." Kieran was quiet for a long time, gray eyes fixed on empty space, as if he were looking into a faraway past. Then he began, his voice low and unhurried. "My father was the one who built this empire. He started with nothing, from the darkest alleys of Chicago, and built a kingdom in the shadows. I grew up in that world, knowing how to hold a gun before I knew how to hold a pen. But my father loved me. He was the only one who loved me." Kieran's voice tightened. "When I was 21, a rival ambushed my father right in front of me. They shot him 7 times. I held him in my arms, watched the blood pour out, watched the light drain from his eyes. He died in my hands, and I couldn't do anything to save him." Serena gripped his hand, saying nothing, only letting him know she was here. "After the funeral, I went to a bridge out in the suburbs. I stood on the railing, looked down at the water, and thought dying would be easier than living. No more pain, no more hatred, nothing at all." Kieran took a slow breath. "But I didn't jump. Not because I wanted to live, because I wanted revenge. I wanted to find every man who killed my father and make them pay. That hatred was the only thing that kept me alive." He looked at Serena, his gray eyes holding a deep, enduring grief. 10 years, Serena. 10 years I built an empire out of hatred. I destroyed my enemies, expanded territory, became the name that made all of Chicago tremble. I had money, power, everything people dream about." His voice turned bitter, but inside I was empty, completely empty. I had no one, trusted no one, loved no one. I was just a walking corpse, getting through the days on work and hatred. Kieran lifted a hand and brushed Serena's cheek. "Then I met you, on that bridge, at 2 a.m. I'd just finished a tense meeting and I wanted to walk alone, to think. And I saw you standing on the outside of the railing, ready to jump." His eyes went wet. "I don't know why I stopped. I don't know why I talked to you instead of walking on the way I'd done with so many others. Maybe because I saw myself in you. I saw the pain I'd tried to bury for 10 years. Kieran pulled Serena against him, holding her tight as if he was afraid she might disappear. "That night, when you took my hand, when you gave me the chance to save you, you didn't know you were saving me. For the first time in 10 years, I had a reason to live that wasn't hatred. It was a person. It was you." Serena cried, tears sliding down her cheeks and falling into the cooled water. "I booked a hotel room for you that night, paid for a week. I left my number and told you to call when you were ready. I didn't push. I didn't demand anything. I just waited." Kieran gave a faint smile. 3 weeks later, you called. The first call was only 2 minutes. You thanked me. The second call was longer. Then we met. We walked. We talked. I didn't ask about your past, and you didn't ask about my work. We were just together, 2 broken souls trying to heal." He kissed her forehead. "A year later, I proposed to you on that same bridge, at 2 a.m, right where I found you. And you said yes. His voice caught. That bridge wasn't the place you wanted to die anymore. It became the place you were born a second time. The place we began. They looked at each other for a long time without needing words. Then Kieran stood, lifted Serena out of the tub, and wrapped her in a soft towel. He carried her to the bed and laid her down gently, like he was setting down his most precious treasure. That night, they made love. Not rushed, not demanding, just two people healing each other's wounds with love. Every touch was a promise. Every kiss was a vow. And when they lay in each other's arms, sweat and tears mingling, Serena knew that no matter how painful the past had been, she'd found home. Serena woke the next morning in Kieran's arms, sunlight slipping through the curtains and laying a pale gold wash over them both. She felt lighter than she had in years, as if speaking everything out loud had finally loosened part of the weight she'd been carrying for so long. But that peace didn't last. Her phone began vibrating nonstop on the nightstand, messages and notifications pouring in without end. She reached for it, and her heart sank. 53 missed calls, 270 messages, hundreds of alerts from social media. The first text was from Brittany, her best friend from college. "Oh my God, Serena, you're the wife of the Chicago Mafia boss, and your ex is getting destroyed all over social media. Are you okay?" With trembling hands, Serena opened Instagram. The #1 trending hashtag in Chicago was Magnificent Mile Assault. The video of what happened at the mall had spread at a terrifying speed. 25 million views and still climbing. Someone had filmed the entire moment. Brandon shoving her down, Finn taking him to the floor, Kieran walking in and carrying her away. But that wasn't all. An anonymous account had posted a long thread exposing Brandon Hayes' entire past. Proof of 5 women he'd scammed over 10 years. With names, amounts stolen, and detailed statements. Medical records of Serena's miscarriage, the name covered, but detailed enough that anyone reading could understand what had happened. And most heartbreaking of all, the story of Jennifer Martinez, a 23-year-old woman who died by suicide 6 months after Brandon abandoned her. Her family had spoken out, demanding the investigation into their daughter's death be reopened. Kieran's identity had been exposed too. Photos of the two of them together, a marriage certificate, articles about the O'Brien family empire. The internet was boiling, half of it horrified that she was the wife of a mafia boss, the other half awed that she'd survived hell and found happiness. "I've seen it." Kieran's voice came close to her ear. He'd been awake for who knows how long, looking at her phone over her shoulder. "Did you do this?" Serena asked, even though she already knew the answer. "I've got people handling it," Kieran said as he sat up and pulled her into his arms. "I told you. I'd destroy him." Before Serena could say anything, Kieran's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and a cold smile touched his mouth. "Richard Hayes." "Right on time," he answered and put it on speaker so Serena could hear. "Mr. O'Brien," an older man's voice came through, strained and tired. "I'm Richard Hayes, Brandon's father." "I know who you are," Kieran replied, calm. "I'm calling to negotiate. What's happening to my son? I understand it's coming from you." Richard Hayes took a deep breath. "How much money to make you stop?" Kieran gave a quiet scoff. "You think I can be bought? Everyone has a price, Mr. O'Brien. I've been in business for 40 years. I know that." "Then let me teach you something new." Kieran's voice went colder. "There are things money can't buy. Justice for my wife is one of them." Silence stretched on the other end. "Then what do you want?" Richard Hayes finally asked, his tone edged with surrender. "1. Your son will publicly apologize on camera, one victim at a time, including Jennifer Martinez's family. 2. He'll get therapy to address his abusive behavior. 3. He'll fully compensate every victim, including my wife. 4. He'll never come within 100 meters of my wife." Kieran paused. "If he does all that, I might consider giving him a chance to rebuild his life. If he doesn't, I'll make sure he has no life left to rebuild. That's extortion. That's justice, Mr. Hayes. The thing the legal system failed to give the women your son destroyed." Kieran stood and walked out onto the balcony. "You've got 24 hours to decide." "All right," Richard Hayes exhaled, the voice of a man who knew he'd lost. "I'll talk to Brandon. He'll comply." The call ended. Serena looked at Kieran, her chest tight with complicated feeling. Over the next 24 hours, Brandon Hayes' world collapsed completely. Rebecca Hughes posted a long Instagram statement ending the engagement, saying she'd known nothing about Brandon's past and felt betrayed. Hayes Investment released an official statement firing Brandon from the family company, citing conduct inconsistent with the organization's core values. His trust fund was frozen for a fraud investigation, and the Jennifer Martinez case was formally reopened, with the possibility that Brandon would face criminal charges. Serena read the news, watched the world of the man who had once destroyed her turn to dust, and she waited for triumph to come. But it didn't. She only felt relief. Relief that he was finally paying for what he'd done, not just to her, but to all the other women too. 4 days later, Brandon Hayes' apology video appeared on every social media platform. Serena sat in the penthouse living room with Kieran beside her, the massive television screen showing the man who had once destroyed her life. Brandon looked like a completely different person. Gone was the polished, confident rich boy he'd been in that mall. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes from sleepless nights, his face drawn and hollow, stubble rough across his jaw from days without shaving. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair a mess. He sat in front of the camera with the look of someone who had been crushed all the way down. "I want to start by apologizing," Brandon said, his voice hoarse and shaking. "I'm sorry to all the women I've hurt over the years. I've been selfish, cruel, and vicious. I took advantage of their trust, took their money, destroyed their lives, then walked away like they were nothing." He looked down at the paper in his hand and read each name. "Michelle Thompson. I'm sorry I took $20,000 of your savings and disappeared. Amanda Rodriguez. I'm sorry I drove you into bankruptcy and cost you your home. Lisa Chen. I'm sorry I isolated you from your family and friends. Karen Williams. I'm sorry I destroyed your career and your reputation." Brandon paused and swallowed. The next part was clearly harder for him. "Jennifer Martinez." His voice broke. I'm sorry I pushed you to the edge. I'm sorry to your family for taking away their daughter, their sister, their friend. Jennifer's death is my fault. I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life." Serena watched the screen, her chest tight with complicated feeling as she saw tears sliding down Brandon's cheeks. She didn't know whether they were real tears of regret or the performance of a man trying to salvage whatever he had left. But she didn't care anymore. "And finally," Brandon said, lifting his eyes to the camera as if he were looking straight at Serena. "Serena Mitchell. Serena O'Brien. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I took your money. I'm sorry I left you when you were pregnant with our baby. I'm sorry I made you lose your home, lose your job, lose everything. I'm sorry for the venom I spat at you in that mall that day." His voice caught. "And I'm sorry, Lily. Our child who never got to be born. The baby we lost because of my selfishness and cruelty. I don't deserve to be called a father. I don't deserve anything." Brandon looked into the camera one last time, to Mr. O'Brien. "I'm sorry for insulting and hurting your wife. I understand what I did is unforgivable. I accept whatever consequences come, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become a better man." The screen went dark. Serena sat in silence for a long moment, staring into nothing. Kieran held her hand, his thumb moving in slow strokes over the back of it. "How do you feel?" he asked gently. Serena turned the question over in her mind. She had imagined this moment so many times during those 3 years. Imagined Brandon on his knees, apologizing, admitting what he'd done, paying for his sins. She had thought she would feel triumph, joy, revenge. But she didn't. She only felt relief, as if a burden she'd carried for years had finally been set down, as if a wound had finally started to close instead of bleeding again and again. "Like the last chapter just closed," she whispered, turning to look at Kieran. "I don't need him to suffer for me to be happy. I just needed him to stop haunting me. And now, I'm free." 1 week after Brandon's apology video, Serena received an alert from her bank. $150,000 had been deposited into her account, compensation from Brandon Hayes for what he'd taken, plus interest and damages for emotional harm. She sat staring at the number on her phone for a long time, a complicated swell of feeling rising in her chest. It was more than the amount he'd stolen from her, more than anything she'd ever had in her life, but no amount of money could bring Lily back. No amount of money could erase the nights she slept outside, the meals she ate out of trash cans, the moments she stood on a bridge railing and wanted to let go. "What are you going to do with it?" Kieran asked when she told him, the two of them sitting on the balcony and looking out at the Chicago skyline. Serena was quiet for a moment, turning the question over in her mind. Then she said it. her voice steadier than it had ever been. I want to help women like me. Women who lost everything because they were deceived, abused, abandoned. Women with no one, nothing, no hope. She turned to look at Kieran. I want to start a foundation. Temporary housing, job training, therapy. All the things I wish I'd had 3 years ago. Kieran looked at her for a long time, gray eyes holding something she couldn't quite read. Then he smiled. One of those rare smiles he saved only for her. I knew you'd say that. How did you know? Kieran stood, went inside, and came back with a thick folder. He placed it in her hands. Open it. Serena opened the folder and her heart stalled for a beat. Inside were ownership papers for a building in Lincoln Park, one of the most beautiful areas of Chicago. The photos showed a 4-story building with classic architecture, fully renovated, with 20 rooms, shared common spaces, therapy offices, and a large kitchen. I bought it 2 months ago, Kieran said as he sat back down beside her. I knew one day you'd want to do this. I was just waiting for you to be ready. Tears spilled from Serena's eyes, even though she didn't want them to. Kieran, I want you to name every part of the building, he said softly, after the people who matter to you. Serena looked down at the paperwork, then up at her husband. The room for pregnant women, or women who've just lost a baby, will be Lily's room. Lily's room, her voice caught. And the kitchen, where there will always be hot food for anyone who needs it, will be Margaret's kitchen. Margaret's kitchen. So we remember the woman who took care of me when I had no one. Kieran took her hand. Perfect. And the foundation's name? Serena thought for a moment. Second Chances Foundation. Because everyone deserves a second chance to rebuild a life. Kieran kissed her forehead. I'll match whatever you put into the foundation, and I'll be with you every step of the way. Serena held him tightly, tears soaking into his shirt. She had found purpose. She had found a way to turn her pain into something that mattered. Lily and Margaret hadn't died for nothing. Their names would live on, in every woman who walked through the doors of the Second Chances Foundation and found hope. That evening, Kieran announced he was going to cook dinner to celebrate. Serena sat on the kitchen counter and watched her husband wrestle with pots and pans, an image that couldn't have been more different from the frightening, cold, dark prince of Chicago. He was trying to make pasta from a recipe online, his face set with the same focus he wore in an important meeting. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Serena asked, trying not to laugh when she saw him pour far too much oil into the pan. I run all of Chicago, Kieran said, confident. I can cook a plate of pasta. 5 minutes later, the pan burst into flames. Kieran panicked and poured water on it, making the fire flare even higher. Black smoke rolled up to the ceiling. The fire alarm began screaming. The sprinkler system kicked on, raining water down on both of them. The kitchen door flew open, and 3 bodyguards stormed in with guns drawn, thinking someone was attacking. Serena stood in the flooded kitchen, hair soaked, water streaming down her face, staring at Kieran O'Brien, the dark prince of Chicago, drenched like a rat, still holding a blackened, smoking pan, his expression stunned like a child caught doing something wrong. She started laughing. It began small, then grew, then turned into laughter so hard she cried, clutching her stomach from the ache. Kieran watched her for a moment. Then he started laughing, too, a deep, warm sound filling the flooded kitchen. I run all of Chicago, Serena repeated between laughing fits. I can cook a plate of pasta. Kieran tossed the burned pan into the sink and stepped forward to hold her, even though they were both soaked. Pizza? He asked. Pizza. Serena nodded, still laughing. They sat on the wet kitchen floor, eating pizza straight from the box, laughing about Kieran's cooking disaster. And in that strange, ordinary moment, Serena realized this was real happiness. Not money or power. Just small moments like this, beside the person you love, laughing at something ridiculous. Thanksgiving arrived only a few weeks after the cooking disaster in the kitchen. Kieran declared he would prepare dinner with his own hands, and this time, he had hired a professional chef to teach him for a full week beforehand. Serena didn't learn that until she woke on Thanksgiving morning and caught the rich, mouth-watering smell of turkey roasting from the kitchen. She went downstairs and found Kieran standing in front of the oven, an apron tied around his waist, sweat beading on his forehead, his expression set with stubborn determination. The dining table had already been dressed with candles, flowers, and gleaming white porcelain. It was the first Thanksgiving of Serena's life where she truly had a family, someone to share a meal with, somewhere she belonged. Brittany flew into Chicago at noon. When Serena's best friend stepped into the penthouse and took in the scene around her, her eyes widened so far Serena thought they might fall right out of her head. "Oh my God, Serena," Brittany whispered, turning in a slow circle as she stared at a living room bigger than the apartment she was renting. 3 years ago you were sleeping in your car. Now you're living in a penthouse worth more than my whole hometown put together. And your husband runs Chicago. Is your life a novel or a movie?" Serena only smiled and hugged her. She didn't know how to explain the journey from the bottom of the cliff to here. Some things couldn't be put into words. Thanksgiving dinner unfolded in flickering candlelight and laughter. Kieran pulled it off. A turkey browned to perfection, mashed potatoes smooth as silk, cranberry sauce with the right sweet tart bite, and a pumpkin pie that filled the room with warm spice. Brittany kept asking about Serena's life, about Kieran, about everything that had happened, and for the first time, Serena told her. Not all of it, but enough for her friend to understand how she'd walk through hell before she found heaven. In the middle of the meal, Serena suddenly went still, her eyes drifting to nothing. Memory surged in like a tidal wave. 3 years ago, on Thanksgiving, she had been curled up in her battered old Honda, arms wrapped around a 4-month pregnant belly, tears streaming down her frozen cheeks. She had been hungry. She had been cold. She had been so lonely she thought loneliness itself might kill her. She remembered whispering to Lily, apologizing because she couldn't give her a real Thanksgiving dinner, apologizing because she couldn't give her a family, apologizing for everything. "Are you okay?" Kieran's voice pulled her back. Serena blinked and realized tears were running down her face. She wiped them quickly and tried to smile. "I'm okay. I was just thinking about 3 years ago." Kieran set down his knife and fork, stood, and came to her side. He dropped to one knee beside her chair, level with her eyes, and took both of her hands in his. 3 years ago, where were you?" he asked softly. "In my car, hungry, cold, alone with Lily inside me." Her voice broke. "I apologized to her. I said I was sorry I couldn't give her Thanksgiving. I said I was sorry I was a terrible mother." Kieran tightened his hold, his eyes reddening, but his voice stayed steady. "You weren't a terrible mother, Serena. You were the greatest mother I've ever known. You loved Lily from the second you knew she existed. You did everything you could to protect her, even when you had nothing. You went hungry so she could live. That isn't a terrible mother. That's the greatest mother in the world," Serena cried, unable to hold it back anymore. Across the table, Brittany's tears slid down her cheeks too. Kieran stood and lifted his wineglass. "I want to make a toast," he said, his tone solemn. "To love, to second chances, to the family we're building, and to Lily, our little angel watching over us from above." They clinked glasses through a mix of sobs and laughter. After dinner, once Brittany had gone back to the hotel Kieran had arranged for her, Serena and Kieran sat on the sofa in front of the fireplace. He brought out 3 small boxes and placed them in her hands. "Thanksgiving gifts," he said, eyes bright. Serena opened the first box. Inside was a gold necklace with a phoenix pendant, wings spread as it rose from flame. Intricate, breathtakingly beautiful. "You rose from the ashes," Kieran whispered as he fastened it around her neck. "You're my phoenix." The second box was smaller. Serena opened it and her heart stopped. A tiny silver lily, delicate down to every detail. "A white lily. Lily, so you can always carry her with you," Kieran said, his voice thick. "Lily will always be in your heart. And now she'll be here too, right over your chest, beside your heart." Serena couldn't speak. Tears poured as she lifted the little silver lily and pressed it to her lips. The third box was a folder. Serena already knew what it would contain, the building papers for the foundation, but Kieran had added a new page. The official certificate establishing the Second Chances Foundation, with Serena Mitchell O'Brien listed as founder and president. "Now it's official," Kieran said, kissing her forehead. "You can start changing other people's lives, the way you changed mine." Serena wrapped her arms around her husband and cried into his shoulder, but this time the tears were happiness. 3 years ago she'd been sitting in a freezing car, convinced her life was over. Now she sat in a warm penthouse, in the arms of a man who loved her more than his own life, a phoenix at her throat and a lily over her heart, ready to turn her pain into hope for someone else. 3 months after Thanksgiving, the Second Chances Foundation officially opened its doors. The 4-story building in Lincoln Park had been fully renovated, painted a spotless white, with fresh flower pots lining the walkway. A pale purple banner hung over the entrance, and in elegant gold lettering it displayed the foundation's name. Reporters and invited guests packed the front lawn, cameras flashing in rapid bursts as Serena stepped out of a black Maybach with Kieran at her side. She wore a simple white dress, the phoenix necklace gleaming at her throat along with the tiny silver lily. This was the most important day of her life, the day she turned pain into purpose, tragedy into hope. Serena led the visitors through the building. The first floor was a shared living space, with a spacious sitting room, a small library, and Margaret's kitchen. The kitchen was large, with a refrigerator that was always stocked, a 6-burner stove, and a long table with enough room for 20 people to sit and eat together. On the wall hung a black and white portrait Serena had commissioned from an artist, drawn from memory, the face of an elderly woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile. Beneath it, in small lettering, was Margaret's name, and the sentence Serena would never forget: "Don't give up, baby girl. This world needs you." The second and third floors held the bedrooms, each room large enough for one woman, or a mother with a small child, clean and cozy, with soft beds and thick blankets. The fourth floor held therapy offices and job training rooms, but the room that moved Serena most was Lily's room at the end of the second-floor hallway. She stood in front of the door for a long moment before she opened it for the group. Inside, the walls were painted white and pale lavender, the colors of lilies. A rocking chair sat beside the window. Butterflies decorated the walls, and on the small shelf beside the bed, inside a glass frame, was the only ultrasound image Serena had been able to keep of Lily, a blurry shadow of a tiny life she had loved more than her own breath. "This is Lily's room," Serena told the visitors, her voice trembling but steady. "It's for women who are pregnant, or who've just lost a child, so they'll know they aren't alone, so they'll know someone understands their pain, so they'll know they can keep living and still find meaning." After the tour, Serena stood at a microphone on a small stage set up in front of the building. She looked out at the crowd below, took a deep breath, and began. "I know what it feels like to lose everything. To lose your home, to lose your money, to lose the person you love, to lose your child." Her voice caught, but she kept going. "I know what it feels like to sleep on the street, to eat from trash cans, to stand on a bridge railing and want to let go. I know what it feels like to believe you have no reason left to live." She looked down at Kieran in the crowd, his eyes wet, his expression full of pride. "But I also know this. With support, with a safe place, with people who care, we can rise. We can rebuild. We can find hope." Serena smiled. "The women who walk through these doors will not be as alone as I once was. They will have a roof, hot food, someone to listen, a second chance, because everyone deserves a second chance." Applause erupted. Serena stepped down from the stage, tears on her cheeks, but a radiant smile on her mouth. That afternoon, the first resident arrived. Sarah, 32, 2 small children clinging to her hands, eyes swollen from crying. Her husband had taken all the money and left with another woman, leaving her and the children on the street with nothing but a suitcase of clothes. Serena welcomed Sarah herself, showed her to a room, helped her and the kids get settled. "You really went through all of that?" Sarah asked after hearing Serena talk about her past. "And you still got back up?" "I got back up," Serena said, taking her hand. "And you will too, I promise." They were in the dining room when a shout exploded from the front entrance. A large man stormed inside, face red with fury, reeking of alcohol. "Sarah, you're here? Bring my kids back right now." Sarah flinched, both children screaming. Serena rose and stepped between Sarah and the man. "You can't come in here," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Who the hell are you to stop me?" he snarled, taking another step. Before Serena could react, 2 of Kieran's guards appeared and blocked him. Then Kieran walked in, his expression cold as ice. "This is my wife's place," he said, calm, with a lethal warning underneath. "The women here are protected. You can walk away right now, or you can stay and learn a lesson about consequences. Your choice." The man looked at Kieran, looked at the guards, then looked down at the hand being held in place. He swallowed and stepped back. "I'll be back," he muttered as he was dragged outside. "No, you won't be back," Kieran said. "I'll make sure of it. When everything's settled again." Serena looked at Sarah holding her children tight, looked at the other women working inside the foundation, looked at Kieran speaking quietly with his guards, and she realized something. She wasn't the one who needed protecting anymore. She was protecting someone else. She was becoming shelter for women the way she once had been. She was carrying forward Margaret's legacy, Lily's legacy, by bringing hope to people who had lost everything. 1 week after the opening of the Second Chances Foundation, Serena received an email from an unfamiliar address. She almost deleted it immediately, but the subject line made her stop. From Brandon Hayes. She sat still for a long moment, staring at that name on the screen, then decided to open it and read, "Serena, I know I have no right to contact you. I know you don't want to hear anything from me. But I saw the news about your foundation, about what you're doing for women who've lived through what you lived through. And I want to say I'm proud of you. You took the worst thing I ever did and turned it into something beautiful. That's who you always were, the person I was too blind to see. I'm in therapy, really trying to change. I'm not asking you to forgive me because I know I don't deserve it. I just want you to know you deserve every bit of happiness you have. You always did, Brandon." Serena finished the email and waited for the feelings to hit. Anger, pain, hatred. But nothing came. She only felt empty, in the most peaceful way possible. Brandon Hayes had no power over her anymore. He was only a ghost from the past, and that ghost had finally vanished for good. She pressed delete without replying, then closed her laptop. That chapter was over. She didn't need to look back. That night, Serena opened the small wooden box she'd kept for 3 years. Inside was the tiny white dress with lilies embroidered along the collar, the dress she'd bought for Lily with her last coins. She lifted it, pressed it to her cheek, felt the soft fabric, and remembered the daughter she'd never gotten to meet. For 3 years, she'd held onto that dress as if it were a piece of Lily, afraid that if she let go, she'd forget her. But now she understood. Lily didn't need her to hold the dress. Lily needed her to live, needed her to help other children have chances Lily never got. Serena drove to the Second Chances Foundation alone. She walked into Lily's room under dim lights, placed the white dress inside the glass case beside the ultrasound image, and stood there for a long time, looking at it through the glass, whispering, "You don't need Mommy to keep the dress anymore, Lily. You need Mommy to help other children. Children whose mothers are walking through the same hell I once did. This dress will stay here, reminding me every day why I'm doing all of this. For you, for the love I have for you." She kissed the glass, then turned away, tears on her cheeks, but a smile on her mouth. That night, Kieran woke her just before 2 a.m. "Come with me," he said, his eyes bright with something mysterious. Serena didn't ask where. She trusted him completely. They drove through the quiet streets of Chicago, streetlights flickering across the windows, and when the car stopped, Serena realized exactly where they were. The Michigan Avenue Bridge, 2 a.m, just like that fateful night 2 years ago. They got out and walked to the middle of the bridge. The wind off Lake Michigan was cold, but Serena didn't feel chilled. She felt warm, safe, whole. She looked down at the water moving beneath them, the water she'd once wanted to jump into to end everything. "This is where I found you," Kieran said, standing behind her with both arms around her waist. "This is where my life started to mean something." Serena pulled the silver lily from inside her shirt and held it up under the moonlight. She closed her eyes and whispered as if she were speaking to someone only she could hear. "I'm okay now, Lily. I found home. I found love. I found purpose. You can rest, my girl. I'm going to keep living. For you, for Margaret, for all the women who need me. I love you. Forever." Kieran turned her to face him and looked into her eyes beneath the moon. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Serena. You saved me. You gave me a reason to live. You're my home." They kissed on the bridge, a kiss sweet and full of promise, in the Chicago winter night. The bridge that had once been the place Serena meant to end her life had become the most sacred place she knew, the place she was born a second time, the place she found Kieran, the place she began the journey to become the woman she was now. Serena Mitchell O'Brien, once an abandoned child, once a victim of abuse, once a mother who lost her baby, once a woman standing on a bridge railing ready to let go. But she didn't let go. She took the hand of a stranger and allowed herself to be saved. She rose from the ashes like a phoenix. She turned pain into strength, tragedy into hope, and now she was helping other women do the same. Serena's story didn't end here. It was only beginning, And that was the lesson this story wanted to leave with all of us. No matter how far life pushes you down into the deepest pit, no matter how much you lose, no matter how much you believe you have no reason left to go on, remember this: there is always a tomorrow. There is always a second chance. There is always someone willing to take your hand, if you let them. Don't give up. Don't let go. Live. Fight. Rise from the ashes like a phoenix, because you deserve to be loved. You deserve to be happy. You deserve a second chance. Thank you for listening to Serena and Kieran's story. Did this story touch your heart? How did you feel hearing Serena's journey from the bottom to happiness? Did this story remind you of anyone in your real life? Or did anything in this story connect with what you're going through? Share your feelings in the comments below. We'd truly love to hear what's in your heart. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel, hit like, and share this video so more people can hear moving stories like this. Every subscription, every like, every share gives us the motivation to keep bringing you compelling videos every day. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and a heart full of love. Wherever you are, whatever you're going through, remember you're not alone, and tomorrow is always a new day. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video.